The birth of Jesus the Messiah was as follows. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be pregnant by the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, since he was a righteous man and did not want to disgrace her, planned to send her away secretly. But when he had thought this over, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child who has been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Now all this took place so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet would be fulfilled. Behold, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And Joseph awoke from his sleep and did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took Mary as his wife, but kept her a virgin until she gave birth to a son, and he named him Jesus. Different people have different ways of coping with things. One fear that a lot of people have is heights or vertigo. I'm not amazing with that, I have to say. I'm not so bothered on a mountain or something like I can just, focus and get, reasonably well there and not worry too much. As long as I'm focused, as long as I've got stable ground beneath me. But where I've got more of a problem is if I'm in some sort of building that sways in the wind. The Spinnaker Tower in Portsmouth, for example. Thank God it was absolutely still when we went up there this summer. But if that had started moving, I'd have been down there as quick as possible, because I imagine it's just going to topple over. It's not, but your fear kicks in. And actually, in the last couple of years, I've been diagnosed with having a little bit of vertigo, just without warning, get a little dizzy and don't know what's going on. I've had various treatments to try and sort that. But what I really struggle with, and my family will be able to confirm this, is cable cars. Cable cars. Chairlifts to a certain extent, but cable cars, because they're so high above the floor, they're above the ground. So high. Chairlifts can be quite close, and that's not so bad. And so I will do what I can usually to avoid them. Sometimes I've even not gone on something because I've avoided it. If I ever go on a skiing trip, I'll look for a resort which doesn't have cable cars. That's a nice drag between you stay here on the ground. I can just about cope with a cable car when it's moving. But I'm aware that the floor below me is pretty thin. There's only a thread above me. Of course, it's more than a thread, but it feels like a thread which is tying us to this cable above us. And there's a long way down, to say the least. But if it keeps moving, I can just about calm myself. It's when it stops is the problem. You do not want them to stop. And when they stop, it waves in the wind, doesn't it? And you're swaying there. And it's certainly for me pretty unpleasant. No one else seems bothered, but I really am bothered by it. It's like, how long before the tension gives way and it just stops? It's totally irrational, isn't it? Well, that's my fear. And usually it's only a few seconds because something's happening at the station or whatever. But I think it goes back to trauma. When I was 12 years old, on a holiday in Switzerland, one of the first times I ever went abroad, we went on a summer holiday in Switzerland with the school, and I was on a chairlift with a friend of mine, and the chairlift stopped. And it didn't stop for a few seconds, it stopped for 5 to 10 minutes. I know it doesn't sound much, but it felt a long time. And we were high enough off the floor for it to be an injury if I jumped off. It's normally a ski lift, of course, in winter, but in the summer it wasn't. And 5 to 10 minutes, and I panicked. And I started saying, I'm jumping. Because I prefer to jump down rather than crash down on the chairlift. And my friend told me, you looked so stupid, he couldn't believe it. And eventually, the chairlift started going again. But I think that's probably scarred me. Now, what I really can't imagine is this. I don't want to imagine it. Hopefully it's coming. Not that. That'll be alright. That, 2023, Pakistan, cable car in the remote area of that country. those cable cars were put in place to mean that people could commute to school or get supplies in these remote, very, very precipitous places without having an hours long or many hours awkward journey by foot. And they can get you to and fro in a couple of minutes. This is 275 metres or 900 feet off the valley floor. That's the height of that cable car above us. So I'd be scared just going on it normally. What happened, they're very badly maintained, very badly put together. Two of the cables snapped and left it hanging like that. And if we can zoom in, there. Can you imagine it? The doors have all flown open. There were doors on it. And you've got 8 people, 6 children and 2 adults, hanging on there for dear life, knowing that something's happened to make it do that, to stop it, and they must have felt the cable snap. Can you, I don't want to imagine it, but terror doesn't even begin to bring us to it. And I remember that happening, and I remember waiting with all the people on the ground, but from afar, and much of the world with bated breath, what's going to happen? Because surely that's going to give, they're finished. That will plummet 900 feet, 275 metres to the valley floor. Of course, what happened was that the Pakistani military tried to set up a rescue attempt. And what they did at first, their first effort was to bring a helicopter in. Already that was swaying violently in the wind, precariously attached. A helicopter comes in with its rotor blades and the downdraft, that's going to make it even worse. At one point they put a rope down and it got tangled up in the remaining cable and it actually flipped that over again. That was probably the moment of most abject terror for those people when that happened. But they did get one person, I think we've got the third one. Yeah, they did manage to get one person off it. And then they realised that that wasn't a great idea. They're probably going to lose the people before they get everyone out. So what they did, it also got dark. So that meant the helicopters didn't do it as well. But they found some people who were experts in zip lines, these adventure type companies. And someone in the middle of the night, or a few people, managed to rig up a line and then went all the way out there and rescued every single one of those people in the pitch black. Now, of course, I'm sure there was massive searchlights on, and the last person who came out was up there for 16 hours. 16 hours. Now, thank God they all survived. I think better than I thought any time that's just going to drop. Just seeing it, it must have been terrifying watching it from the floor as well. Apparently, one of the children fainted. If I'd been up there, I'd have fainted in just about 3 seconds and been completely useless. And you needed a few people just to stop people falling out of it. A few people conscious. But what about those rescuers? We must thank God for them. But 3 things about the rescuers. They were persistent and committed to their job. Well, they were persistent and committed to their job. They didn't give up even when the helicopter rescue didn't work. They still tried something else. Persistent and committed. Secondly, they were willing to take huge personal risks. Think of the person who's put the thing down. Think of the person who actually went out on that zip line. And thirdly, they were qualified to do so. As a third thing, they're qualified to do so. They had experience of not actually that, but similar sort of things of putting zip lines out and doing all that sort of stuff in the helicopter. They also had the available, they had a huge amount of strength, agility, balance, and most importantly, the one I would have failed on big time, not fearing heights. And then they managed to do so. And we must commend them. I think the government did later commend them for that wonderful thing. But I want us to think about our rescuer, Christ, the one who has rescued us from sin and judgment. And if I want to make a really strange analogy, we're all in the cable car of sin and destruction. And fallenness from God, and we're in danger. And without being right with God, we will fall to the valley of judgment. And we needed a rescuer to come in. And some things about our wonderful rescuer. Firstly, he was persistent, willing, and committed. Yeah, God did all sorts of things. It's not like God had a change of mind. God knew what it would take, but he did go through the Jews and the covenant with them and the Mosaic law. And eventually he brought his son into the picture. But we see Jesus' committedness to this in the Garden of Gethsemane. I know we're moving on a long time from Christmas, but Christmas, of course, points to Christ's ultimate redemption of us. So it points, it put everything into process for him to live among us. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus saw the terror of what lay before him. And he prayed, Father, take this cup of suffering from me. You know, in himself, in his flesh, he didn't want to go through with it, understandably. But yet, not my will, but yours be done. He knew it had to happen. And the Bible tells us he was strengthened by angels to keep going. He was absolutely committed and persistent in his task of saving us, of rescuing us. And he was willing to do so. It was his will as much as the Father and the Spirit's will to rescue us in that way. Secondly, he was qualified. He was qualified. Note the name that was given, absolutely appropriate. Jesus, the one who will save his people from their sins. Only Jesus, many people were called Jesus in that time in Israel. It was a common name, but only one truly lived up to the name, the one that we remember. Why is he qualified? Two things. He's God and he's eternal. The sacrifice for all of us had to be eternal. It needed something or someone eternal. The Lord himself, Emmanuel, come among us. And secondly, he was qualified because he was perfect. In Hebrews it tells us he was tempted as we are, yet did not sin once. He never failed. We all fail, but he never failed. So his sacrifice, when he made it on the cross for us, was sufficient, and it was worthy for God to accept it as a holy God, accepting a holy and a perfect sacrifice. So he's qualified for the job. And thirdly, I've mentioned it already, but about willingness, but he was willing to take huge risks. Now, we know that God knows all things, so in one sense there's no risk. But humanly speaking, remember where he was born among animals in total lack of hygiene, in a place where infant mortality was pretty high. So humanly speaking, that looks like a huge risk. Think of Herod's murderous attempts to destroy him, to remove him because he couldn't stand the thought that anyone else might be a king, a threat to him. Think of the devil's tempting of him, come on, there's an easier way out. Think of even natural things which may have had a supernatural element, like the great storm on the Sea of Galilee that suddenly came up. All those things. But most importantly, Jesus did one thing that the rescuers in Pakistan didn't do. If we think of what they did, one of them particularly went all the way towards that cable car to drag the people out of the prison they were in. It really was a prison. Although it was the one thing stopping them dying, it was a prison. It must have felt like a tomb that was going to encase them. And they went all the way there to take them out. Jesus has come among us to take us out of the sin that besets us. He's brought us up, and we need to. And if you've never put your trust in him, you need to cling on to Jesus and allow him to rescue and bring you, not just to the terra firma, the safe ground, but when the fact that he will take us through not just in this life, but to eternal rest with him, where we're free of judgment we would otherwise have to suffer and have to encounter. But you know what Jesus also did? Those guys, they went in, they grabbed people out of the cable car, they took them to safety. Jesus took us to safety and then sat in it himself while it plummeted to the earth. He took the ultimate fall for us. He is our glorious rescuer who put himself in our place. The pagan king Darius said this in Daniel chapter 6, after Daniel was rescued from the lions. He said this: God rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He didn't really know. He was talking about Daniel being rescued from the lion's den. But what he couldn't have known was that God one day will rescue all his people. And he'll do that by giving his own son for that purpose. May we remember that this and every Christmas as we wonder again at God coming among us. Praise to him. We're going to sing another